As I recall, I was told that Othello was recorded in Russia because at the time, Paul Robeson was not allowed to record in New York. There was like a ban against his recording. But the unusual part about that is that particular record, although that series of records, are on a 10-inch recording. It's not an LPD. It's a straight 10-inch recording. Am I saying the right? I think I'm giving you the right numbers. It was okay. Think of it this way: it's a 12-inch recording that would be recorded on a 10-inch disc. You don't have that many discs of that type in existence, and almost none in our communities anymore. And the thing is that what makes it so rare is that it was recorded in Russia. It's a 12-inch recording. But it's recorded as if it is a 10-inch. I hope I'm making sense of it. Sure, you would have to see it to really understand what and it's been so long since I've seen it. Now, aside from that, Othello was a big Broadway hit, and it became an international hit. Finding copies of that record, I've been told, is almost impossible. You can find a record, but you can't find the identical disc to what you have there.
Okay. And so we also have on display, as I mentioned to you, the tuxedo, the Brooke Benton tuxedo. Tell me a little bit about Brooke Benton in terms of his significance to your foundation.
Well, Brooke was a fun guy. And for an instance, when we were starting the very first performing arts group that we had was from that group came a member of Dream Girls. Now, if you remember in Dream Girl, when the stout girl is at the first half, you don't see her anymore. Yes, that was Jennifer Holliday. There's been a million of them since. But anyway, the person who replaced her, the sleek young lady who replaced her, happened to be one of the girls that was a member of my group called the Reflections. Yes, I put the Reflections together because I had lost a group called the Sequels. These were girls from Jersey, 4 girls from Jersey. They didn't. The girls from Jersey did a series of shows. I think it was 33 shows for the housing authority. And how that happened was um, John Lindsay. I'm testing my memory now. There was a guy named Butler. I've known Butler for a long time. And Butler told John Lindsay, if you knew him behind closed doors, he knew all the words. And he told Butler, go out and get me people that know the street. Well, I grew up in Brownsville, and Butler, there was the Gallo brothers, little, what you would call a punk group today. They were not killers of anything. They were just above a loaf of bread at a time. But anyway, Gallo and I met with John Lindsay, and when we walked in, John Lindsay said, the first thing that he says, I don't want my street to blow up. I'm ready to ask him, what do I look like, a stick of dynamite or what, you know? So he says, you guys know the street. I was told that you guys know the street and you know how to do it. So he says, what would you do if, so I said, I said to Mayor Lindsay, and he said, just call me John. And I said, well, the only thing I could do is possibly develop a baseball team or maybe a league. So he says, how would you do that? He says, I told you I don't have any money. So I said, it's a good idea. Well, in those days, money was, you have to remember, this was prior to poverty programs. And we did whatever we had to do to raise money, and legally I'm talking. Right. So anyway, what happened was we got this kids from each borough, but you could not be a baseball player. You couldn't be a varsity player. We didn't want kids that could play. You're not helping anybody if you get kids that can play. Good players, somebody always want them. So we were asking the non-players that wanted to play, but anyway, I think we screened down to 125 in each one of the 5 boroughs, and then we had a borough tournament, and the tournament we screened down to 25 kids from each borough. Now you got your core of your team, Queens, Brooklyn, whatever. And we had a program. But that program was only going to be good for baseball. What do you do in the evening? Well, I remember the WPA and the PWA when they had artists and this guys, and these people were really talented people doing various things. And they also had entertainers. So I said, why don't we give the kids some sort of entertainment, and in the meantime, let them do things that they want to do. Stand on your head, jump up and down, who cares? Whatever you want to do, because you'd be surprised some of the talent that would come out. That was the way the performing arts got started. Now, Brooke Benton came in. I went to him and I said, Brooke, we want to have a talent. No, he says to me, he said, what the hell do you want now? So I He said, no money. I said, no money. He said, you heard me. So I said, but Brooke, you just gotta help me this time. This was during the time that he was hitting big. And so he says, what's going on now? So I said, we want to rent Rochdale Village, has a ballroom down there. And he said, well, why can't you use a church that you've been using? I told him there's a flood in the church. We couldn't see. He was a friend of the guy. It's a Methodist church. I don't know if it's still there or not, around 164th, 65th Street. And the guy, the minister, built the church over an apartment building. But what happened was they had a flood. And by them having a flood, the floors buckled and all kinds of stuff, so we couldn't do anything there. So I told him, I said, now the kids are halfway home. And so he said, what are you going to come up with next? Boy, you driving me crazy. And he said, how much is it? So I told him. He said, all right. And he gave me a check. Now, remember, this young lady that wound up with the original for what do we call them? The original Dream Girls. She and there was another one, Shirley Ralph came from out here, and she went on to perform. And when that show closed, or whatever had happened, I understand that she met a man at, she was working at, it was a show place. She was working at a show place, and this guy married her. Nobody ever saw her again. He took her away and they moved Vermont or somewhere. But that was, her family saw her, but I mean, the general public didn't see her anymore. But in the meantime, we had something that we could really show them and said, you see this young lady here? As a matter of fact, I got a photograph of her. I'll give them to you. It's a photograph of her that when she was a kid. Tommy Davis, do you remember, what was the name of that? Oh my goodness. Buddha Records. The guy who owned Buddha Records went to school with Tommy. He and Tommy went to school together. But so they picked them up, and they did some background recording. As a matter of fact, they also recorded with Zulema. I don't know if you ever heard of Zulema. Zulema was from Earth, Wind, and Fire. So what happened was, I understand that there was a big distribution problem with Buddha. I don't know. I remember hearing, it's the only time I ever hear him, I remember him saying anything negative about anybody. Not, he probably did, but Jackson, what's the guy's name? He has an Italian name. I think he's the guy that married, what's the girl out of Jersey? I mean, a girl out of Huntington. What's the girl's name out of Huntington? The blonde hair. Mariah Carey. Well, whoever her husband was, I think it was her first husband. This is the guy that we're talking about. Yes, and you know, he had to. You had to come by him in order to get your records distributed. Yeah, Matola, that's right. And this guy was a young guy from Where they come from? Florida State or somewhere they came from. And he was all set and ready to go. And, well, it turned into a very, very nasty thing. And it was also, it turned out to be one of those I kill your cat, you know. And um, so that's how Buddha never went in the place. It started out okay, but when this guy walked in and told him that I'm not paying you a dime, and the guy says, "You're not paying me a dime? You heard me." And so right after that, Buddha went out of business. You can recall that Buddha had Midnight Train to Georgia. They had it for a while. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
About the significance of Brooke Benton. So one of the first Buck Clayton stuff, the trumpet case and the mutes.
Oh, the Buck Clayton. You see, he brought that material when we officially became partners with an agreement that was drawn up by President Basson, and neither one of us were music people. We didn't, but we knew that it was such a rich area that it should be remembered and recognized. And just like all the stories that I'm telling you now, all those stories happen within 10 blocks of each other. See, because Brooke lived in, as a matter of fact, Brooke bought this in St. Albans and in Addersley Park. Then none of those houses were built at that time. Those houses were older houses that were modified and whatever. Brooke was the only one who owned a house in there, and how he got that house was one of the guys, somebody that he knew, was wanted to unload this house, and that was a brand new house, and Brooke Brent bought it, and he stayed in there until his career began to decline, and his children grew up. So he moved over to a smaller house. But the person that did a lot for Brooke Benton was Clyde Otis. Clyde Otis was the brain behind what's his name? He was a songwriter, but he was really the brain behind Brooke. Yeah, so that's I haven't seen his wife now. Oh my God, they honored me one night, and she went as my guest. That must have been about 15 years ago, 20 years, at least 15 years ago, because I had just started to see Joan. See, this is my wife passed away, and that's how and then I met Joan, and she was from South Carolina State, and we had been doing things for South Carolina State. For an instance, we sent them a few a few football players, and a couple of students, and we helped them because some of our guys by that time were making good money. And Tommy was very, very generous, although he never made $100,000 in any one year. But he was still a very generous person. Didn't bother. So
So one of the other initial donations was the Al Sears saxophone. Um,
The Alcea saxophone is quite a story. Um, Alcea saxophone is the instrument that uh, that Al wrote. Oh my God, I'm trying to think of the name of it now. But what he did was he took the bridge out of a whatever that means, but he took a bridge out of a solo, and that's how he made. It was from that he made the song. He and Duke had words about that because what happened was Duke said you did it on my time, and Al said yeah, but it was my music, and they. But the bad part about it was that at the time that happened, he took Johnny Hodges and 3 or 4 Ellington players, mostly because they were tired of traveling. These guys were up in years, and they were tired of traveling. And Al was taking. See, Al was a very smart man. He used to own either Sylvia Music, I think, which is a publishing company. And he was a guy who brought brought Moondog, who's originally he was known as Moondog, but he was Alan Freed. And he brought him to New York. And that goes into a lot of a story that we can do at another time. And the reason that I'm saying that is because it involves disc jockeys. And it's a whole a story within itself because everybody have different versions, and they're not wrong. They're all telling the truth, but it's the way the situation worked for them. For an instance, I'll just give you a taste. His name was Smalls, I think it was, and they called him Dr. Jive. Well, Dr. Jive's version of a disc jockey was different from Make Believe Ballroom. And Make Believe Ballroom was Martin Block. So and then you had Willie Bryant. So that's why I say every one of them had a different version, but you can't call them liars. All we can do is pass on to younger fellows like you. This is what Martin Block told me. This is what Tommy Small told me. And there are a couple of other names that should be put in there too. Now, I did want to go back to one thing. Is talking about that garment, is that a tuxedo?
Yes, a tuxedo with a blue shirt on.
See, I'm really. What do we have? What do we have from Fess Williams?
I didn't see anything for him.
Oh, it's identified as.
It's Brooke Benton, yeah.
Okay, all right. The reason I said it was because all this happened around the same time, and they didn't play at the same time.
Right.
As a matter of fact, Duke got the job in the Cotton Club because of Redhead. She got the job in the Cotton Club because Fess Williams said the money it wasn't enough money for him. And so she said, I'll get you this young boy, play a lot of piano. And what are you talking about? So then they came up with this. There was this little young group from Washington. And that's the Ellington group started. Well, not how they started, but that's how they got into the Cotton Club in the first place. So that's
and that actually segues me into, as you know, Duke Ellington is, well, as you know, as a prominent part of the foundation and the collection,
mm-hmm.
Particularly the books, the posters,
Mm-hmm.
Even some autographed
Mm-hmm.
materials too.
Mm-hmm.
So, can you tell me a little bit more about the presence of Duke Ellington in your collection, as far as how much he plays a role?
Well, you see, and I have a photograph. Remind me to give it to you. Not today, because it's here in the house, but I would have to pull it out. See, I went to school. There's the bald head guy that you saw in Ellington's band.
Yeah.
That's Toby Hardwick. They used to call him Otto. And it really is, it's and there were people who called him Toby. Well, what happened was I went to school and went to church with his niece. His niece was um, his, his niece was his older brother, his oldest brother's daughter. See, Toby was crazy. You know what I mean? He was young and good time, and so but he could play. He could play a lot of horn, especially C melody, sax. So what he did was he uh, his back in the old days. Now remember we were living in Washington. In the early Duke was about 20 years older than me, but in the early days, our families lived about 4 blocks apart, maybe 6 blocks. I'm not sure. And when Duke would come home, very few times that he would come to New York. Come to Washington. This is Washington D.C. now. So we're 17th Street in Washington D.C. And John, Odo's brother, used to have crabs and oysters and fish and the. I'll show you. I got a picture of the backyard that during those days in the 40s, you couldn't buy paint because of the war. You couldn't fix your fence, so you had to use that calcimine or whatever it was to put on the fence. And you again you can see Toby's niece. See, when we were in school years ago, Washington had its own society within itself, and you had to be kind of like in the inside society. And because of my parents, although my father was dead, they knew who he was. And when we moved to Washington D.C. and started going to Thaddeus Stevens Elementary School, and I was an honor student. So naturally, that kind of gave me like a little bit of prestige. In the meantime, there was no doubt about it, we were gonna marry each other. And we actually it went on for about, it went on from the fifth or sixth grade until I was about 18, 19. But she was too good. She was a wonderful person, but she wouldn't complain about anything. For an instance, I was supposed to have been out singing, and half the time I wasn't nowhere near a song, but she would never complain. And she was she was good to me, but she wasn't good for me because she didn't. If I had wound up being a shoe shine boy, her culture told her that you have to be loyal to your spouse, and I don't know, for whatever reason, I just lost interest, and she lost interest, but we didn't want to tell each other that we had lost interest, and so the wind up was that she went her way, and I went mine. But there was, in the meantime, many years, many times, not that we were at parties. We were kids. When I say kids, we were in our teens, and Duke and them would be drinking and doing whatever they're doing, and we had to be you were taught to be off in the corner somewhere, you know. But that's the way it was. So the I grew up to know Duke, and when I came to New York, and I was working here in the Navy Yard, he was my first wife. He was usually she used to work on part time. See, I had a record store. This is, oh my God, it's so complicated. I had a record store, and my first wife used to work on my store because she was she was younger, and the important thing was that she was popular among the kids in her school. So the wind up was, she came to me and said, "Do you mind if I change jobs?" So I said, "What do you mean change jobs? What's wrong with this job? A good big dollar an hour. You get a lot of money, girl." So anyway, long story short, she said, "Mr. Ellington wanted me to work for Tempo Music." So I said, "What?" So I couldn't. How could I tell a girl you can't take the job? It was a different time from now. You didn't have uh, uh, opportunities that you have now, and that was considered a really, really good job because, first of all, she would be working with and for Duke's sister at Temple, because Temple was up on Fifth Avenue. So she'd handle the mail and did typing or whatever. So anyhow, in 1973, that was that book that I told you about, and that book, when Duke autographed the book, I told you Johnny Hodges walked by, but I think that and Duke could hardly believe, because so many things were happening at the same time, and none of you said, "What the hell are you doing with her?" You know. So that's how it all started. So I said to Ray Nance, Ray Nance is crazy. And so Ray Nance said, he said, "What's going on here?" And I think it was a trumpet. Who was it? One of the new trumpet players that said that little boy beat Duke out. That little boy told Duke up. And the guy said, "What the hell are you talking about?" He said, "He just told me he got for $3 for." No, he said Duke was paying her $10 a week or whatever it was. And I said to the guy, I said, "Yeah, Duke was paying $10 a week, and for $3 I got for the rest of my life." And so, this was a lot of years in between. And they cracked everybody up, you know. And that's why he, as I said to you, he wrote the word. He was trying to write Clarence and Joan, and he wrote Clarence and John.
Oh, right,
I hope you can bring it up, but if you can't, we have a. Well, you can keep that one anyway, but I have another one that I'll give you. Is a brown color
right.
because they don't, and it's a story that, uh, through the years and later on, may be interesting to somebody.
Sure.
Sure. Okay.
Was part of the early donation was the Lewis Latimer flute.
Oh yes, that was a part of. I've always had this thing. Um, being a father myself, a lot of fathers, and being a father of a girl, yeah, that's right. Being a father of a girl myself, a lot of people kind of wonder, what do you do with a girl? At those years, you didn't want to. I'm talking. Latimer is older than me, but we had the same kind of problem. Latimer was a good tennis player, so his brother was an excellent tennis player, but he was a good tennis player. In the meantime, I don't play chess. I'm not interested in chess. But what do you do? So that's how I became a stamp collector, because my sister gave me the first stamps that I ever had. She gave me 10 stamps of Booker T. Washington. And so I said, what am I supposed to do with these? She says, you keep them. And keep them. And I can't spend this. So anyhow, that's how this happened. Now, let's fast forward to 1950. Yeah, Carl was born 1950. So I'm looking in the drawer one day and I see these stamps. And that's how we became, we collected stamps together. See, originally, I used to collect the UN. And I don't mind telling you, when she went to college, I sold her UN collection, because I had one book for her, one for me. And it wound up that it was worth a considerable amount. But getting back to this whole stamp collection business, it was because of my daughter that I developed that hobby.
Yeah. And that sort of led you into the.
Is this one?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Hello. Unbelievable. You see him before you go. You got to come back here and.
Yeah, I definitely will.
And sometime he plays a whole lot of cello.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he plays a whole lot of cello. A pretty good pianist too, but a concert pianist.
Right.
Yeah, you see.
So the last part we'll ask for today will be because you already, as I mentioned, talked about the stamps. So can you tell? I know you and I talked about collecting because I collect as well, but we also want to kind of talk a little bit about the Heritage series, the stamp series, and what that significance is for the foundation. I mean, we have in the school, we have a couple of pieces commemorating the series, the bicentennial. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that and how that whole process got started.
Well, you see, what happened was I'll give you for an instance. If you take a look at, and this jumps way ahead of what you were talking about, we'll have to go over that again. If you take the state of Alabama, which was one of the cruelest states in the 50 states. But yet, Alabama produced an unbelievable amount of talent that we from day to day that we don't think about, and people should think more about it. Now think about forget about the Rosa Parks and all this, or we'll say despite all the cruelty or whatever you want. That's the state that produced W.C. Handy, brilliant musician, Nat King Cole, Dinah Washington, and there's several others. I don't think we have a stamp of Cootie yet, but there are many people who came out of there, and I'm a believer in this. If you and I are walking through the forest and you offer me a pear, I'm not going to give up. I'll wait to the next tree. It might be a peach tree, and you might take to the peach tree, or you may not even want the peach. But the next one is an apple tree. But don't give up. And then also, you say, the guy sees you got an apple, you got a pear, you got a plum, and then you got a peach. How come you got all these peaches? Simply because you don't like the peaches didn't say that they weren't produced. It's the same thing that we have here. Now, when you take a look at the people that I just named, this was talent that came from an area, a community, and the churches that we wouldn't believe. And we can't afford not to elaborate on this. This is really the reason that I was as anxious to meet you as you, or I think you were as anxious to meet me. I may be. But anyway, what I'm saying is this, that this is a rich community, a rich country, and everybody puts something in the basket. The point is this, not simply because I like grapefruits, I'm not going to let you put your orange in there. And this is the whole idea, if I'm making sense, that
Absolutely.
people will get a better understanding of what we're trying to do. And that's despite all of the negativeness or whatever that might happen. See, because I'm nobody, I have nothing, and I don't pretend to have anything, but I can tell you this much. Everything that you see here was because of the fact that I was willing to do what I had to do, including lose my health. But look at it. When I'm gone, somebody can enjoy this for the rest of their lives and another life. And that's why we've got to make kids understand, hey, you can don't ever let anybody tell you you can't get anything out of this, because there's an old saying that we used to say many years ago, don't go home broke. If you can't get 10, take 2. But you say, well, don't go home broke. Take 2. You can at least get a half a loaf of bread, but if you ain't got nothing and you didn't try to get nothing, don't expect to have anything. Shh, why'd I do that? Okay, so.
Well, thank you, sir. Thank you very, very much.
Listen, it's my pleasure, and I will say this to you, and I mean it, because we owe a lot to Bob Hammett. Trust me, we owe an awful lot to him because he insisted, and I said no, forget it. I don't want to bother because you can't even get those people to understand what I'm talking about here. And there's a lot more to go where this came from. I want you to remember something. They're supposed to be naming a post office after me. It probably won't happen because I'm not most popular person in the world, and which is okay because there's a possibility that uh, they may be forced to do it. The opposition may be forced to do it because you see, you can't play children's games uh, at an adult affair. It doesn't work out that way. Now, if you take a look at the people who went to the Jamaica post office, here we had Ella Fitzgerald, Jackie Robinson, you had Lena Horne, you had Mill Hinton, Count Basie, Cootie Williams. How could you not? How could you? And remember something. The person who started the whole postal situation in that community knew all of these people. They all went to the same church. They all hung out at the same place. So they say they all drank from the same watering hole. And there's no place in this world where you had the income that those people had and did what they did. As a matter of fact, I had some material I wanted to give you, but I'll make sure I put it together, and I will get it to you. You leave me your address.
Yeah, sure.
And this because it'll help you to understand more about. This is I'm sorry, what's his name?
Dan Phelps.
Dan. Dan, I'm going to send you the same thing that I'm sending him, because you'll get a better understanding of what I don't know what you know about the community, but there was a lot more to that community than Domino Sugar, you know, and you know you need to know it, and the need to be added on. See, because I was one of the people that fought to get that college there, and now to think that I have to argue with people to give it its due, it's a hard thing, because there's room enough for everybody to do everything. And my big reason that I was willing to meet with this gentleman and talk with him and give him anything that I have for a while that I'm going to be here is because of the fact, not of what we're doing, but what can be left and passed on. As he said, it was saying something to me, and I don't know if I physically will be able to do it, but see, there was a time I could just jump in my car, go where I want to go. Now, if I want to do something, I got to ask somebody to do it for me. But you said you had a window there, glass.
Yeah, I have two offices. They have glass windows all.
When are you ready? When are you making the exchange?
That's up to you.
Up to me.
Yeah.
Well, see, the reason I said that is because you should really know the story of Count Basie.
Oh, yeah.
Especially in that community.
Right.
And see, the other thing, the same girl that we were talking about.
Yeah.
Count Basie. See, when Basie started working in Vegas a lot, he used to have the band out there because they were writing for the Nesco or something, and then but more than that, they had Quincy Jones.
Right.
So rather than have to get them together, they just took them out there. It was cheaper to live out there than to try to bring them home and get them together. But in the meantime, he had what's the word for? He had an agreement with the studio.
Oh, okay.
See, with NOLA, I think NOLA studio is right across is right across the street from Birdland. And he, Count told me, just check and find out when the band's going to be in. And anytime they're not in, you could use my studio.
Okay.
Now you can you will meet these you'll meet these two girls um, from two different organizations. One was the Sequels, and the other one was the what's the name of it? I can't think of the name of it. The Sequels, Reflections, right? And you will see them. And as a matter of fact, I don't. I'm just throwing this out for you. You can handle it any way you want. My family is supposed to be giving me a birthday party on the 24th, and he might want to be there because this way it'll give him a shot. Or you might want to make, because this will give you a shot to actually talk. They say, what are those clients like?
Right.
What does it mean? It's this OB I ever worked for. Whatever they're going to tell you.
Right.
But at least they'll tell you. And it's just like, but I feel good. I don't know if I can if Linda's going to be there or not. I don't know.
Okay.
Because it's a family, it would be wonderful because it's a family thing. It's not everybody that is being invited. Dr. Parmet's being invited. What's his name? Howard is being invited. You're being invited. He was just in. So that's all we have right now. But make sure you give me those two names so I won't forget.
Yeah, I'm gonna write my.
Okay, sure. All right. And I thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you. It's been